Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Charlotte Wittenkamp, and we've been kind of LinkedIn posting and commenting buddies, so to speak, for some time, and I'm glad to actually have a conversation with you, and welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're interested in and things that matter to you, or whatever you want to tell us is a way of kind of introduction.
Um, yeah, that's hard to pin down, as you probably know because you watch my profile. I'm Danish. I've lived in California for the last 28 years. So, am I more Californian than Danish? I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
I am active on LinkedIn. I used to do, while in California, some coaching for people who landed in California because having done the trip myself, I knew that too many people returned before their time. I would not say, I mean, typically it would be, when their contract ended, but instead of renewing their contracts, they would go back to the old country. And I thought that was a pity because that's such a waste for both the people who will send them out, but also because it means that they didn't thrive very well. Usually it's the family who wants to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can turn it into a positive experience rather than just a stressful experience, then people can look back at it differently and have another story about it. So I've been doing that for a while, and then of course COVID happened, and I decided that this is not this is a good time to wind that down.
Excuse me. This is the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about people who go back to their home country after living in America, and so I'm really curious about what this. So people come here because they get their company brings them here, or they get a job here, and they work here for a while. And is it a question of not adjusting to American life, or is it a question that they don't perform at the level that that they want, or is that something in the family that they don't adjust? What's going on there? That's a very interesting phenomenon, I would think.
Well, I would say that in general, 80% of people who are not living in their own country go back to their own country because a lot of people are coming for study. And a lot of people are coming on a contract. I mean, obviously, everybody who's working for an embassy is going back, right? Or going to somewhere else, but they're not going to stay and hang around because their contract is only that many years. Very often in business connections, the contract is 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And then often there's a chance to renew it for another 2 years. Now, we're not talking about this being just because that's what companies do, but also about how does American immigration rules allow people to stay. So this is sort of interwoven between immigration rules and company practices. And what often happens is that, you might be able as a spouse to get away with having a hole in your contract for 2 years in your work life.
Yeah.
But then you want to go back because having a hole for more than 2 years means that you're not going to work again at the same level as when you left. And obviously that did not used to be the case because back in a generation or two ago, the dual career thing was not as much a thing. So a lot of processes, because they have become processes, are geared towards a Mad Men era of where you could just assume that your wife would, up and drop her career.
So
Now the difference is, of course, that you might have people who come and then they stay here, and then you get a change in your visa and you're allowed to work, and then you can go from there. But otherwise, what you used to have was that executives would be sent out, stay for 2 years, perhaps stay for 2 years more, and then go home. And if your spouse and family is not happy, then the idea that you can even perform to your top performance level is just a mood. So apart from that little distraction of having an unhappy family, it would be nice if everybody were happy, or at least saw this as an adventure and not as something else.
I have had now that you describe what you're telling us, I understand this from a couple of points of reference. I began my career as a minister, Presbyterian minister, and after my first call, during that first call, I married and we had our first child, and then my position was discontinued, and we ended up moving to Southwest Oklahoma, to a small town, rural agriculture town with a military base. And as they say, it's not the end of the road, but you can see it from there. And that literally was true. And it was, I did my job. I did well. I thought it was a challenge. I was learning, but it was really difficult for my wife because, all the communities, relationships are already set, and new people coming in didn't have a place to kind of fit in. So after 2 years, 2 months, 8 days, and 13 hours, we were on our way to West Virginia, where we spent 7 years and we had 2 more children, and we had a very good experience there. And one of the things I was serving at a college campus, and I was, as one of the officers of the college, we were looking at filling positions on the staff, whether they're faculty or they're other positions, and the vast majority of the people who were applying to come to work at the college were people who were native West Virginians, but who had left and gone somewhere else, and they wanted to come home. And I hadn't thought about that until this moment when you were saying that, and I think it's a very interesting phenomenon, and oddly enough, I'm back in my hometown. I moved back here about 2.5 years ago. Oddly enough, but my motivation was different than I need to go home. This wasn't that; it was other motivations. But it's a very interesting sort of thing. So, do you see yourself going back to Denmark at all?
I've been traveling extensively in that direction over the years we've been here.
Yeah.
And particularly as my parents grew older and needed more help. So some years they have both passed. So there's I would say a little less attachment, but not a lot of less attachment, because as they say, you can take a Dane out of Denmark, but you can never take Denmark out of a Dane. I don't know if that's true, but I can only speak for myself that it rings very true.
Yeah, it was family considerations that brought me back here, and I'm glad I'm here, and things are working out well. But it is interesting. So
I think also there's something about that when you go somewhere else for the first time, as a young or middle-aged, or whenever you go somewhere else to live for the first time, you have to just figure out too what that means, including that it means that you have to be proactive about your social life, because nobody's going to do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously here in the US, the churches used to serve that function tremendously well. So so you would find, whatever congregation was closest to your heart, and then they would make sure that you got integrated, because that's the other side, of immigration, that you cannot expect people to assimilate automatically. I have so many texts coming in. Can you hear the pinging? Because I don't know how to shut it off. I even
No, I don't hear it. I don't hear
good.
it.
In that case, I would just ignore it. Nobody assimilates unless there's somebody on the other side to help them assimilate.
Yeah.
And we kind of ignore that. That's actually means that the local population has to get involved. And then we fault the people who are moving around, or being moved around, or for Christ's sake, many of them are living because their countries are drowning, or in war, and then we're faulting them for finding the people closest to them in mindset who can actually speak the language, which is kind of useful if you don't speak the local language. I cannot tell you how much of a difference that makes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
what do we think? Do we think people assimilate by, exteriors or something? They don't. They assimilate because somebody reaches out. And from my experience, has often been that the people who have reached out have themselves tried to live somewhere else. So they have walked in the shoes, and thank you to them.
there is a cultural aspect to this, and some
Very much.
communities are welcoming and
Yeah.
some communities are not. And the question is, how do you distinguish that? And how would you know that if you've never been there? And I, what I'm back in 2019, I went to Thailand for a conference, and I was there by myself, and the conference was starting in the afternoon of the day that I was, this first day of the conference. And I'm standing in the lobby of the hotel where the conference is taking place. And in through the door comes this entourage of Africans. And they come and they surround me. And they must have sensed that I was alone. I didn't have anybody there, because they came and they welcomed me basically like they were welcoming me into their family.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me that. They said, this is something about who we are as Africans, that we welcome the outsider into our friendship or fellowship or whatever. And it was really fascinating, because three of the guys in that group, there were probably a dozen, 15 in this group of people. Three of them just kind of stuck to me like glue for the whole 4 days of the conference. And I ended up going to making 2 trips to Africa before COVID started, just to work with them, do leadership work with them. And one of them, who does rural economic development, took me to his farm. He's out in Western Kenya, and we're walking through the farm, and he's talking about the past, when his father was the farmer, and then they started a local school, and he says, we're gonna take our house and we're gonna build a new house. We're gonna take our house and turn it into a leadership center for groups to come and things like that. And as we're walking through this little pasture behind the house, he points over to a bank of trees, and he says, and over there, I'm going to build you a Nandi hut so you'll always have a home here in Africa. No one has ever said anything like that to me. But he saw that people who are outsiders need to have a home where they visit. And I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. I'm thinking of so many, I was charming, not to that extent that anybody built me a home, but interactions I've had in these many years, and particularly I would say the early ones really left an impact because you did not quite expect that kind of kindness, and I think that's the America that is not on the front page of the newspapers,
Right.
but is very, very prevalent. And we underestimated our peril, the impact of that. And that's where we should put our focus, is how do we keep that spirit alive and forget about all the other crap that's going on.
Did you watch any of the YouTube videos of Europeans that came to America for the World Cup and they're surprised at the way they were received? Have you seen
No,
it?
I haven't. I'm not a big soccer fan.
Well, they were surprised by what they found in America, that the receptivity of people,
Yeah,
um, food portions and crazy places that exist, and their whole perception of America was shifted significantly because of their experience here. And it reminded me of the places I've gone where I felt the same way, that if you're open to people, and I'm leading up to what we were talking about before we started. If you're open to people, then you will find that you're going to move into an interaction with people in such a way that they want to be interacting with you.
yeah.
And I think that openness is really a key to longevity and a happy life, and and I know a lot of people who are not like that, and they're kind of trapped in some kind of hard shell that it's very difficult for them to break out of, because for whatever reason.
I think when I said that if anything we would talk about today would be trust, and then we're getting into that territory, I think.
Yeah.
There's a concept that's called negative politeness and positive politeness. And you can never think about what on earth is negative politeness. How can politeness be negative? America is, if you were measuring how people behave, they are on the utmost end of positive politeness. And the research into this weird thing is that when you have this hodgepodge of people from everywhere, everybody have to prove that they're trustworthy. And you prove that you're trustworthy by being open, by being interested, and by being friendly in your actions. And of course, that's friendly in your actions is sort of a code we understand between ourselves. What is friendly and what is the opposite of friendly? In some places, it would be said as something which is interest here might be seen as untimely curiosity, and who are you to probe into my life in that way?
Mm-hmm.
So the other end of the spectrum is, who are you to think that anything you have to say is interesting? Why would you think that, or why should I think that I should take up your time? And you can see that's actually equally valid worldview, is just very different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work well for getting to know other people, which is kind of, if you come here or if you go anywhere and you're just yourself, you're not going to get to know anybody if your worldview is, who am I to think that I should take up any of your time?
I've seen that, and
yeah. So that worldview, you would see typically of people who know everybody who are around them, because you don't need to, I don't need to tell you who I am if we went to school together. You know that. It may not be who I am anymore, but you know, I know that your picture of me is pretty fixed, and I'm not gonna rock that boat anyway. You know, so
what I hear in that is that if you're in that kind of mindset, that you lack a degree of curiosity, which is missing, and therefore you're missing out on some of the interesting things of life because you're not curious about it. You're not curious about people, and therefore you don't know how to ask questions that are respectful questions which build trust. But you ask questions that sound like they're accusations.
yeah, not necessarily. It could just be that you are confirmed in what you think you see, and then you don't need to ask the question, right?
That's true.
So, and for that reason alone, it's a good idea to go and you know, live somewhere else, even if it's just, you know, somewhere where you don't know people. It doesn't have to be that you move to the other side of the world, but far enough away that you need to get to know other people.
Yeah.
And usually, you know, for people, unless they move geographically, they will only experience that kind of change when they move to a new job and get colleagues that they need to get to know. Which means that here we have sort of the task to facilitate why we are together. And then you can remain task oriented. But it's not the task orientation that's a glue that holds the organization together. It's the orientation towards genuine interest in your colleagues.
When you moved to the United States, which was what did you say, it was 28 years ago, something like that. Had you lived in any other place than Denmark at that point?
No, I hadn't.
So you were encountering a really total change of your whole way of approaching life, because you entered into a world that was probably very alien to what you knew back home. Would that be a correct assumption?
It was very alien. I would say it's an odd thing, because those of us who grew up with Donald Duck, we knew, you know, a lot of the stranger things. I mean, just the strange thing of the school bus and the school warden. I mean, who's got truancy police officers? I never encountered that in my country. You know, so there's a lot about the everyday culture you can learn from reading Donald Duck. but yeah, it was a big transition. I think for most the transition of that you have, you know, 100% of your community is somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. Fortunately, I had only 95% of my community somewhere else, because when we moved with a startup. So I had friends among the other families who had moved over. That gave you know, I think about the South African Sauerbrunner, that greeting that I see you, and by seeing you, you come into existence. Nobody sees us. We stop existing. I mean, when the unfortunate, very tragic, real experiment, which was not an experiment, but is for learning, is that you can give babies all the food and diapers they need. But if you don't interact with them, they die, which was found in some orphanages in Romania back in the 60s.
Yeah. And that has a lifelong effect upon them.
Well, lifelong effect, if you die or dead, then yeah. But
if
yeah,
they
even
survive, if they survive, they will have. It's like,
yes, absolutely, and we see the same things with just you don't need to be away from your caretaker for a very long time if you are a very young infant, and that will mar you. Your trust is being hurt by.
so these are all challenges that are worldwide. It's not like there's, I don't know what the word is. It's not located in a particular place. It's really everyone needs to have some sort of connection to someone else,
Yes.
where there's an emotional resonance that validates the person's life as something valuable.
Yes.
And I know that there are places where that is not. I know there are communities where that is not well developed. And it has attracted people who don't want that kind of emotional intimacy, let's say it on a social level. And it attracts people that don't want that to those places. And they kind of work, it becomes kind of a mechanistic community, social life. These are the things we do. And this is, and here's how you join us. Here are the rules, and if you're very social and you're also very open and you're curious and you want to have kind of a social intimacy where people actually reveal themselves, then you may have a hard time existing in that, where there's a lot of exclusion. You want to be in a place where there's a lot of inclusion, and I see that. And one of the things that this whole thing that I'm doing with the podcast is to kind of demonstrate how you can meet someone for the first time and establish rapport that has meaning to it. And most of the people that I've met through this, I want to know them for the rest of my life. This is not just kind of one-off things, but I'd like to know them for the rest of my life. If that's a possibility, the further this goes on, as the numbers grow, I'll hit 300 different guests by the end of the year. It becomes more difficult, but that's really what my aim is, and so far it's worked out well.
Yeah, now I'm sitting with this question of what your aim is, because since you just said you cannot, nobody can hold that kind of connections at the level you want to hold them.
I have
so I'm wondering what does it I can there's this demonstrating that you can have a discussion about something real, which I think is profound, because we kind of skirt around on the surface very often in our discussions. And then there's the building, I would say, the first thread that you can put more and more varnish on, that it will become a rope, that will become a huge wire.
Yes.
But you can't do that with 300 people. So that's like there's two different pulls here, I think.
I don't expect, and someday it'll be 500 people. And if this continues as long as I can, someday it'll be 1,000 people, but I don't expect them to be my best friends. That's not the point. What it is a demonstration of is what Mark Granovetter wrote about 30 years ago, which is the strength of weak ties. You familiar with Mark Granovetter's work?
No,
Well, his point is that in networks, the networks,
but I know the weak ties.
but that whole idea of
Yeah.
we have a weak tie. We don't have to be best friends, but we have a connection here which matters. And
Which is why I keep sending people in your direction.
I know, and I appreciate that, and I think that's the way society functions in a healthy way. And the question is, can we respond to those introductions in a way which affirms that idea, where other people say, "Oh, well, that's really I can do that too." So it's a demonstration experiment in a sense of networking through introductions. It's a demonstration of how do we have a conversation of respect and meaning when it's our first conversation together, like we are having. How can we do that so that people can see that, well, I can do that, and how do I learn to do that? Well, I'll keep watching the Eddie Network to see how that works, and so I think that what I'm doing here is something that's missing broadly, and so I'm kind of pushing against some social resistance to this kind of thing that I have observed over a long period of life.
I must say that I read Adam Grant's work of givers and takers and matchers back just when it came out. And I think what I'm seeing is the giver mentality. And that's what really the strength of loose networks is, that when you have a little bit of insight into what some people do and what some other people might need, then you connect those loose connections and say, hey, I mean, that's what I do with you, right? That I think, okay, well, I know Eddie needs interesting guests, and I think this person is interesting, so perhaps that will be a match, and then you can take it from where you are. And of course, that comes with a little bit of, I think this person is interesting, which is an endorsement, right?
It's exactly right.
And that makes it a little bit easier for the other person to be open to what that person is bringing in. And even if we're not talking about you specifically, then the same thing is, some people you can say, yeah, I worked with that person, and some people you say you should work with this person, but that's not the same endorsement. Right?
There are people that I've had on here who, when they showed up on the screen, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know their name. I knew that they had scheduled and someone had recommended them to me, and I but I couldn't remember who had recommended them. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything about them. And so the immediate challenge was, well, who is this person and how can I see them for who they truly are, rather than kind of feel put off by that, and how do I go and recognize them and appreciate who they are, and affirm that too, and then think, so, and this is the extension of this whole kind of social philosophy, is, so who do I know that I think they should know, and who am I going to introduce them to?
Yeah.
So, and that happens every time.
I think the only caveat I have around that is that for you to think that you see who they are when you have a camera rolling might not be who they are. It could be who they want to be seen as.
And my job is to see beyond that and to see through that.
Yeah.
And to affirm this so they don't feel like they have to present themselves in some persona, but rather be their true selves.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
That's also something that you walk into a business after hours event and everybody's posturing to everyone else because they want people to think that this person's important. Well, I think they're only important when they decide they want to see the importance in other people. Those are the people who are the most interesting, who are deflecting all that attention from themselves onto other people because they want to see who these other people are.
Yeah. The curiosity that make people shine. That's a beautiful thing to watch.
So let's come back to something we talked about earlier, and I think we can pick up this notion that so if we're going to live a long life, and most of us are going to live much longer lives than our grandparents have lived, except for mine, they all lived in their 90s and their 80s. But for most people, their grandparents die at a younger age, and then they will. So how do we maintain some kind of motivation that wants to continue to embrace life um, and receive the very best in life as we're discovering it as we go through life. We're not Gen Zs. We're in that older phase of life. I call it the third half of life. So how do we look at the world that's before us as we age and say, well, how do I make the most of this? And how do I learn and enjoy this?
I think that the preparation actually comes during the earlier years. And the preparation is not to be too much invested in any one identity.
Ah,
Because if we become so much enamored with ourselves in an identity and that identity stops being relevant, then who are we? And I don't know if you know the book Transitions.
uh-huh.
I'm trying to look for it. Anyway, that's the transition from being whatever professionally to not being that whatever professional can be a really, really hard transition. Because it's like if our self-worth is attached to that,
Mm-hmm.
and we haven't figured other places to attach our self-worth, well, then what are we when we are not that? I had a friend, I still have a friend, who was doing some work in the house and then for that needed to move the furniture. And in that process emptied a bookshelf for the work or the books that had been part of the PhD study and all that. And then it was now I'm not an academic anymore because I had to let go of all this, right? And then when the books moved back in, another bookshelf was emptied for the books used professionally. And then it was like, and now I'm not that anymore either. So who am I? And from the number of bookshelves, or say, still a vicarious reader, and a curious person, and a kind person, and a good friend. And I think all those deserve their own kudos, because that's not a small thing to be a good friend. But again, this how much are we attaching ourselves to history and to, I would say, the doing part, rather than the being part. So I think that starting earlier, kind of dislodging ourselves from our doing part, focusing more on who do I want to grow into. Sometimes our doing part is stopping us from growing into who we want to grow into, because there are all these pressures and things that we must do that we would get unpopular if we didn't want to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And
I
if
think
you move,
you're special because you started with saying, I want to be a person of service.
yeah, but
So
it, but it
that's a pretty strong route to whatever you probably have done.
well it is, and a lot of that was because when I was in college, and we're talking over 50 years ago, the early 70s, I didn't fit into any of that. I didn't fit into the traditional academic model. I couldn't sit and read a 300-page history book in 2 weeks and master it. I would read. I'm thinking about every sentence, every paragraph. I'm imagining. I'm trying to process it. I'm a process person. So so I had difficulty with that, and which said I'm also going to have difficulty with a lot of the way the world is organized, which turned out to be true. I ended up in ministry because it had such a broad expanse of things that I could do, and I could get credentialed, I could have a job, I could get, pay into a pension, all have health care. I could have all of that too. Not saying that that was my primary motivation, but the context was allowed me to take on a service mindset, and I did all kinds of different things because of this, um, and it allowed me to continue to change.
What I'm hearing when you describe your college experience was that I want to know, I don't want to pass a test, but I want to know because I want to know it.
Yes.
And I think that's both very laudable, but and also very, very, I would say, speaking to how the system functions. That's probably not. I really hope that the doctors want to know because they don't have the book when they're
Yeah.
standing with their knives close to me. But there's a lot of I want to say that I did this rather than I did this about stuff,
Yeah.
and instead of it's like it's enjoying the being in it.
It's so interesting because it wasn't just a college thing. It was also every organizational setting. And and the way I see it as I was accepted, I was included wherever I was, but I never felt like I fit in. And and that question has stuck with me all along. And it's actually made me very sensitive to people who also feel like they don't fit in. And many of them um, have a difficult time with their own sense of self-worth because it was important for them to fit into an academic environment or a corporate environment or some kind of social environment, a family environment where inclusion was important and you had to be like them. And I found I was never like anyone, and I was a real outlier. And and I think it's because of my family, and particularly my grandmother. My grandmother told me when I was 12, she says, "You may do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name." And so I had the freedom, the liberty to go do whatever I wanted to do, and I've done that, and I'm still doing that here in my as my I approach my mid 70s. I'm still doing that, and what I find, and okay, and I'm curious about what you think. What I find is that there are a lot of us who are like this, and some people would be classified as polymathic. Some people would be considered neurodivergent. Some people are, considered there are other terms like this, where there's this broad, they have a large scope to their interest and a large scope to the things that they do, and they have all kinds of things, and they're not very narrow, or they're very broad. Those people are emerging as people to be recognized and appreciated for the first time in my lifetime. And that's only happened in the last, I would say, 5, 6 years. And what it means is I'm saying what I'm identifying is that there's a culture change taking place where we need people who have a far broader range of skills and insight, because the world is not simple and not structured and not siloed and compartmentalized like it used to be.
Have I introduced you to Bruce Warjack?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll do that once we are off here.
Okay. So what do you think of that? Do you?
I recognize exactly what you're saying. And that's why Bruce comes up in my mind. He introduced me a long time ago to what he called pie-shaped people. You're nodding, so you probably know the term. That most people are T-shaped in that they have this deep expertise knowledge, and then they have general knowledge at a fairly shallow level. But pie-shaped people have a deep T, and then they have another knowledge thing that they probably know more about than just about most people do. And the beauty of that is that some processes or thoughts might come from this part of the knowledge, and it's very useful in creativity, because then it can jump to another field, which is, as I was reading yesterday about how I was hearing that a lot of people died because they got sepsis when they got in deep vein injections, and it wasn't because they didn't know how to do it. It was just that nobody stopped the surgeon when he was skipping a step. So somebody knew that you would have a checklist for flying, so you should have a checklist here, and kept the hospital, gave the nurses the authority to, check the checklists and stop if anything, if the checklist was not followed. And very often that has been a problem in so many connections, that people don't question authority, and then things go haywire. And that's sort of an example of the knowing of a checklist, moving that from one domain to another domain will be an invention in the new domain. Moving any idea of a process from one domain to another domain. That's why, there's so much research in biology that says, okay, well, the plants do this. What do they actually do? Because that seems to be a very, very useful thing. I wonder if we can do that too. But it requires that you have deep knowledge about the plants and have an idea of where you want to move it to.
I think it's possible.
Yeah, and I think that's what, the low-hanging fruit in creativity have been picked. So now we need to have that kind of thinking, and that requires polymath. Now that sounds like a very fancy name for just knowing more than one thing, but that we alternatively it requires collaboration, and collaboration is not a small thing either. So, but that again requires that we are not taking our knowledge too seriously, and think it's the only thing in the world. I see that among startup people, that you have a very, very technological oriented people who think that to have a company, that is the one thing. And if there wasn't this, there wouldn't be a company. I'm sorry, there wouldn't be a company either if you can't sell the product, and if nobody can sell the product. And if you're so self-righteous in your idea about your product that you're pushing away customers, then you still don't have a company. You might have a very fine idea, but it still needs to land in the customers.
So do you think that this, whatever this, put a frame around it, whatever this thing is, do you think it's a matter of aptitude, or is it a matter of behavior? Is there a polymathic aptitude, or are there polymathic behaviors? Because the question I have is, could we design the education system to teach these behaviors?
The interesting thing is that there was actually the whole idea of being undeclared is for people to use the time in college to figure out what do they like, and what are they good at. And it doesn't have to be the same as your parents.
Yeah.
Particularly not when your grandmother has said you can do anything you like. We should not underestimate, though, the message that people otherwise get, that you do this because that's good and laudworthy, I don't know how to pronounce that. And something else. I think what I see now, which I find really fascinating, is that there's so many young people who say, no, actually we'll go into the trades because there's so many academics that don't get a job. And if you are a plumber or electrician, or, if you're good at whatever it is you're good at, it doesn't have to be something, wild and fancy, because people who are good at what they do is not hanging on the trees. There was another thing you mentioned that I wanted to come back to, and that was the thing about fitting in, because I want to speak very much against fitting in. I want to belong. And I recognize that I probably haven't fit very well into a lot of contexts, but I think I felt generally that I belonged all the same. So there's this thing about, do I want to belong? I think that's, one of the scourges of this poor country, is that there's a lot of unbelonging in its foundation. Because, if you belong where you are, why would you move to America?
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. I agree.
And that's, one of the sins of the fathers that will visit us on 7 generations. That if people feel they don't belong, then that's a huge, I won't say waste of energy. It's a suck of energy, and a suck of life vitality. And it means that the people around you you'll be adverse to them, even if they're their own family, because you are dysregulated if you don't feel the belonging. So we're back to the small children who were not looked after properly, and thus didn't feel that they belonged in this world, and it has a long tail.
There's an aspect of this that takes me back to something that Groucho Marx once said. He said, why would I want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member?
Yeah. But that's pretty harsh on himself, really, right?
Yeah, it is.
But I think unfortunately that's a very, I would say, much too normal attitude.
Well, he's a comedian, so he was saying it in jest, but he knew that there were people that would
Oh yeah, and
identify
it
with.
might even have applied to him, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that uh, this is a a conversation that other people need to be a part of, because I think these are all we're exploring things that other people are interested in, and I'm curious, just to have that conversation with other people who, come on the podcast or we have them in another way, because I think that if we're able to have a kind of a broad-based conversation about these kinds of questions about people and who we are and identity and where I fit and what I do and how I make changes and go through all those sort of things, that it provides a way for people to better able for them to better able give them a capacity to change and to adapt to circumstances that are alien to them. And that's where we started, about people who move from a foreign country and come to America. I mean, like you did. And it feels alien at first, but then you adapt and you become a part of this place, and you become you're still a Dane, but you're also an American at the same time, because some of those cultures all become kind of enmeshed in who we are as persons. And um, and I think that that operates at a cultural level, but it also operates at a personal level, because these people that we become close to, they're giving us something that we're absorbing into who we are, and there's things that about us that are being absorbed into this, so that there's this commonality that we begin to share that I think is really important and has been missing for 20 or 30 years, but I think it's now being recovered.
I think this idea of what have I not seen this way before?
Mm-hmm.
And so much of what we see, whichever way we see it, is shaped by the context of our background. And to have, I would think, the humility to understand that our context is a very limited context compared to what exists in this world. So if somebody had a different context, then they probably might have reached different conclusions. And that's enormously freeing,
Yes.
because it means that there are many things that can be right. Now, there are also things that are objectively are wrong, right? We shouldn't kill babies and stuff like that. And pollution is not good. But we don't have to be so judgmental.
Yes.
Being judgmental takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
If we can be curious instead, and I find that very, it gives so many more nice people if you just want to hear their story, because then you understand where they came from and what their thinking was, and you might have done the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you might not, but at least it opens a conversation. And a friend of mine, Tracy Rubel, she says, try to find something in everybody that you can fall in love with.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
And that is, I think that's so profound. Look for that, because then you're looking for the light in that person. And
That was the way
everybody has a light.
that was how I stopped judging people. It's okay. What is it that I can see in them I can love and I can appreciate?
Yeah.
When I made that a discipline, it's a discipline, it's a behavior. And
Yeah, and then you have to understand that how do you think? I mean, being curious about how you think yourself is probably the first step anywhere.
yeah,
And again, make that not non-judgmental, because you too are a product of your own behavior, background and context, and who shaped you and what systems thought that you should be one way or the other. There's a lot of stick and carrot around.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, Charlotte, This has been great. I thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Um, it's been so enjoyable to have this conversation after, kind of passing in the wind or in the light, uh, online. And I'm grateful for who you are and the wisdom that you bring.
Thank you.
And I wish you well as you continue to go through your life and whatever comes from the future. And may it all be beneficial to everyone that comes to know you.
Well, I will do my best to find good profiles that might come and enjoy your discussions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for watching. I hope you have found encouragement from our conversation today and believe that you may feel alien and alone at this point, but if you somehow dig into your own mind and develop some curiosity about the people that you meet, maybe you can make a shift from feeling like you need to be receiving something to being able to give something. And if you do that, I think you will find people open to you and find that you will receive back more than what you ever thought you would if you had just tried to take. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye-bye.